Jeremy was not a tap dancer. He was a drummer. So he started to learn how to tap dance when he started optioning the script about 15 years ago. So bit by bit, he learned this strange art form. And yes, we had doubles, and they were so important to the process. But at the same time, what he was doing, you couldn't fake.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, a gifted Jewish tap dancer is recruited to perform in 1930s Berlin in director Shira Piven's drama, The Performance. The film tells the story of Harold, an accomplished tap dancer touring Europe with his troupe in the late 1930s. When they are scouted by a Nazi attache for an exclusive performance, he realizes they don't know about his Jewish identity and is faced with the dangerous dilemma of performing in secret or staying true to himself. In addition to The Performance, Piven's other directorial credits include the feature films Welcome to Me and Fully Loaded, and episodes of the series Room 104, Claws, Transparent, and One Mississippi. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Piven spoke with director Jade Jenise Dixon about filming The Performance. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you guys for coming out. Wasn't that an awesome film? So I'd like to first congratulate you on a wonderful film and a female director. And I'm so happy I'm the one to moderate this because I just
Thank you.
love it.
Thanks for doing it, Jade.
Of course, of course. So I saw on the screen that this was based on a short story that was in the New Yorker by Arthur Miller. Can you tell me how you came to know about it, how you found this, and just give us that journey?
Sure. First of all, thanks for coming out on a holiday afternoon, everyone. And it's nice that they play the whole credits here. We often, when we do a Q&A, we just sort of interrupt the credits, but I think it gives people time to kind of digest the film a little bit. And I never like to bombard people right afterward with a lot of, with a lot of talk. But now you're going to get some talk. So my mother, who is a person of the theater, actress and teacher mainly, occasionally a director, play director, she found the story in the New Yorker and she sent it to my brother and she said, I think this is a role for you. And she also sent it to me and we all talked about it. And Jeremy started optioning the rights from Rebecca Miller, who was managing her dad's estate and she's a director in her own right and married to Daniel Day-Lewis. And Jeremy loves to tell the story of how he was literally Daniel Day-Lewis is in the background as he's negotiating with Rebecca Miller and sort of feeling he kind of felt like he was sort of negotiating with her or auditioning with her, auditioning his ideas about, adapting this. And I think he just knew that he loved the story at the time. And I sort of lived with it a while. And then when I finished my last film, Welcome to Me, I had such a good collaboration with my editor, who was also a writer, but really mainly wanted to write. I said, do you want to adapt this short story? And so that was almost 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. And we started to dive in and adapt the short story. But I really had this moment of connecting with the story. And Jeremy had been optioning the rights for a few years at that point. And it just had that thing, that indescribable thing that you just feel like this is a movie. I have no idea how we're going to get there, but let's try.
Awesome. So it was a short story, and as the co-writer and director, how much of that was embellished? Like how short was it? How much did you have to embellish? How much creative license did you have? So fill in the blanks for us from how short the story was to like what we see on the screen.
Okay. Yeah, the story is really, I mean, Arthur Miller is one of the major American playwrights, and his plays are rich and dimensioned and thematically interesting. And his short stories are, he's not famous for his short stories. And that I find them a little bit like, there's something a little bit dark and almost like a sketch. I won't say entirely. I won't say all of his stories are like this, but there is just this germ. This story was like a germ of an idea that was kind of that really let your imagination fill in a lot of the blanks. And for me, I think that's, having adapted a lot of things for the stage, I think that's sort of the ideal piece of material that you want, is something that's really inviting and has something at its core that you just are gravitating towards, but also leaves a lot of room for the imagination.
And speaking of the stage, so your family owned a theater company in Chicago, and I think I read that you were in some of the productions, but then you went on to direct several stage plays, and then you did a few feature films after that. So, what was your journey from the stage to directing, movies, feature films? What was that like?
It feels like a variation on the same idea, but yeah, directing films is challenging in a way that if you had told me that I was going to be directing films when I was in my 20s, I would have said, you're crazy. I have ADHD. I can barely put my shoes on in the morning. I want, give me a script and I can say my lines and inhabit a character. But I always also knew I wanted to, I always loved directing. I think I directed for the first time when I was about 17 and I loved it. But something happened in my late 20s because I was really, it's almost strange for me to say it out loud, but when I was acting, it was my life. I loved it. And then something happened and I started to direct and it was like a skin that fell away and I have no interest. I'm like so happy that I don't act anymore. It's just a thing that I used to do. But yeah, directing films also, when I directed my first film, because I love directing plays and it was the most challenge that I ever felt creatively. I felt like everything, I'd studied some dance. I was study composing in college. I was a music and theater major. And I felt like with directing theater, it used all of me in a way that I loved. And there was always a feeling like it was a step ahead of me. It was really, there was a particular kind of challenge that I really enjoyed and also terrified me. And then when I directed my first film, I really thought I would hate it. I don't know. I thought that it would be technical. I thought that it would remove me from the creative process. And the opposite happened. I really fell in love with it, almost like on another level of it. Now, I love also directing plays still, and going back and doing theater it's like a vacation in a way. It's relaxing almost because there's not, there's like 10 things to think about, not 100 things. But there was something about the challenge of directing film that was completely, I could hyper-focus. It was all-consuming. And it constantly made me feel like I have no idea what I'm doing moment to moment.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that because we had a similar journey. I started off as an actress as well and did, stage, and then also went to doing a film. So I knew that was a question I wanted to ask you because people don't understand how writers and actors can also transition into directors. So that's good to know. Speaking of directing, your brother, Jeremy Piven, didn't he do a wonderful job? I mean, His performance was top notch. And I just wonder, how did you pull that performance out of him and the rest of the cast? What was that like working with your brother?
I did all of that. I pulled it out of him. No, quite the opposite, actually. It was so fun to get to work with him creatively because we worked together as kids. We acted in a Commedia dell'arte show together that John Cusack actually directed, and inspired by the work of Tim Robbins and the Actors Gang, that's still doing a similar style at the Actors Gang here in LA. And he kind of influenced my brother, and a bunch of us kind of immersed ourselves in Commedia dell'arte. And that was the last time I think I really collaborated with him. And that was like, I don't know, like the early maybe the early 90s. But we had never, and I think I directed him in something in high school. It was an adaptation of a Kurt Vonnegut short story called Harrison Bergeron. But other than that, we hadn't worked together as actor-director. But I've directed my parents as actors, and and we've both been directed by my parents. So we were like, okay, let's just do this. But the reason we weren't afraid of it, and my husband thought we were crazy. He was like, well, you're doing what? You're going to work with your brother? But just the idea of siblings, all of the layers of it gets complicated. But he's such an amazing actor. And I had this feeling of like, I knew his range. I really had a sense of all of the soft spots in him that you don't see in Entourage per se. All of his, there's one, he does a role in Smokin' Aces, a film by is it Carnahan, I think. And he reminded me of a young Al Pacino, and not a lot of people. It's not a huge role, and I feel like you've seen bits of what he can do in different films, but to have it all in one role, it was just like, as a director working with actors, I just was so excited to work with him and be able to just give him the space to do all of the things he can do. And I feel like, in a way, if I have a superpower as a director, it is to give actors the room to do what it is they do, not to get in their way too much. And of course, you have to guide them here and there, of course. And there's so much, then you can get in the edit room and like, chop them up in ways that is actually really satisfying. But you can't do any of that if you don't have a great performance on your hands. And I knew this was a side of him that everyone hasn't gotten to see. So it was satisfying creatively.
Yeah, and you did a great job with that. And speaking of being an actor, I mean, when you were an actor first, I should say, it's a different thing to direct other actors, because you kind of, like you said, you know how to give them space. You understand what it is to be on that side of the camera. And so you were able to not only work with the actors and pull out performances, but then the shots, it was shot so well. Tell us about your relationship with your cinematographer. Like, were there rehearsals? How did you collaborate with him? And how did you collaborate with him?
Well, I sort of chose him because I liked his work that I had seen. He hadn't done a ton of features. And of course, when you're doing an indie movie and, you don't have 10 films to your name, they want you to work with a star DP. And that's always like the push, and he was not. He was an Israeli guy who our producer Daniel Finkelman introduced me to, and said he wasn't even pushing him. He was like, "Meet this guy, see what you think." And we connected right away. He's a guy who was behind the camera starting at like age 17. He was like jumping out of planes, evidently with a camera in his hand. That was how he served in the Israeli army, was by being a filmmaker. Somehow that happened. And he works all the time. He does a ton of commercials internationally. And he was willing to give me the entire summer before we started pre-production. He's like, I can give you my time. And that was that kind of pushed me over the edge. I loved the look of what he did, but also the fact that he and I could spend time going, meticulously through the script.
Yeah, the look was absolutely stunning. It was gorgeous. And some of the shots were just so cinematic. And I was wondering, like, what your process is. I noticed the jib shots. There was when they were working on the play, the actual theater. There was that beautiful, jib shot. There's the 360 when Harold and Carol were dancing. Those are hard to do. You have to light that from the top. There were just so many beautiful shots that I was just like, oh my God, as a director, I'm going to steal that, or I've done that, or I love that shot. What's your process in terms of shot listing, or do you do it on the day? How do you come up with shots like that?
What I've discovered with doing film is that I like to sort that relationship between director and actor, where I feel like when I'm working with actors, like I was saying, I feel like I don't want to get in the way of their impulses. Part of my training is improvisational. So I feel like the minute I'm going to get in the way of their natural instincts, I'm going to lose something. So I feel that way also about department heads. So I feel like I just want to invite them. I don't want to say, do this. I, of course, have I don't love the word vision, but there's not a better word. So I do have a vision for where we're going. But I also like to really elicit from every department head what they're good at, what they bring to the table. So, and with editors, with production designers, costumers, and of course it's a balance, because if what they're bringing to the table is out of left field, there is something that I will communicate this specific, and the more they give, the more I get inspired and the more specific I get with my notes to them. But our DP, Lael, just had this, like, he just was like kind of improvisational in a way, but not. Like, he was very, very technically adept. But when we were talking, like he wasn't, how do I explain it? There was just this this freedom emotionally that he had. He's like, I can see this. What if this? What about this? And then I would say, what about this? And we would have that back and forth. And we knew, one thing that I knew in my collaboration, which we were talking about, is that I knew that I wanted this piece to feel very contemporary. At the same time, I didn't want to compromise the reality of the period, the authenticity. So that feeling of, I knew that I wanted to use a bunch of handheld, shoot a bunch of scenes handheld, but not the whole thing. So a lot of people will tell you, is it handheld? Are you shooting on sticks? Is it more traditional? And I just feel like whatever the scene is calling for, that's what you use, and it will work in the long run. But I also knew I wanted to use 8mm footage, and I knew I wanted to use found footage as well, and to try to blend the two. And so I kind of told him, here are my ingredients, here's what I want to do. And he was able to really get in my head and understand what it was that I was seeing. So it was really fun to do the more intimate scenes handheld, to be able to do that 360 with the dance. That's something that he understood how to shoot, which is, it's a very delicate thing. To talk to your cameraman. And I can't remember if he might have shot that himself. But anyway, yeah, he was kind of everywhere at all times. Like, then with a big dance number, he had 4 cameras going because we wanted it big and grand and beautiful and have that feeling of like, this is a tap dance troupe that could play at the Palace or,
Yeah, those dance scenes were grand and they were covered really well. I mean, we would see feet, we'd see, I love the way you shot through things too, especially when they found out who they were actually going to perform for. Like the moment was so silent, but then it was like you were a fly on the wall. You were looking through material and through, overheads. I mean, it was just, I was wondering, like, how, if that was on the day, if it was something that was planned. But you just said it was a collaboration with your DP, and you got into each other's head. So, speaking of, the dance scenes, your brother, did he tap dance himself? I mean, there were head to toe shots, so he obviously was tap dancing. Were there doubles, and what was the choreography like?
We had a great, incredible choreographer who was not only a tap choreographer, but his specialty was in that particular period. That period is different than when tap made a resurgence in the 90s with Savion Glover. And it was really all about the feet and the looseness of the ankles and the knees, and rhythmically very, very complex. But the 20s, 30s into the 40s was all about, almost like a little bit of, I mean, we all know the Astaire and Rogers kind of feel. It's a little bit of ballroom. It's a little bit of, there's a lot of upper body involved. So he knew that period inside and out. And we were very lucky. Also, the other 3 dancers Jeremy was not a tap dancer. He was a drummer. Thank God. Because as he said, he was like, it didn't occur to him that he's like, I'm going to play this role. Oh, wait, I don't tap dance. So he started to learn how to tap dance when he started optioning the script about 15 years ago. So bit by bit, he learned this strange art form. And yes, we had doubles, and they were so important to the process. But at the same time, what he was doing, you couldn't fake,
For sure. You absolutely couldn't fake. He did an awesome job to learn how to tap dance. I mean, you mentioned some greats like Savion Glover, Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, one of my favorites.
Our models were like the Nicholas brothers. And part of me, when we started to film, I was like, we're doing a period piece on an indie budget with tap dancing. I'm crazy. We're never going to and I'm not kidding. I was really like, God, I have no idea if any of this is going to work. And somehow we pulled it up. It was one of those times when a lot of different magical elements and having enough time having time before you actually get to shoot, before you even know if the film is a reality, there are things brewing. So I feel like those years of not being able to make the film, or years of having a producer, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, we had a producer that fell by the wayside. And we even had financing, but it really wasn't, it wasn't a financing deal that we could have made work. And so basically we ended up just having this time to research. I got to sit down with an editor I admire named Hank Corwin. And I was like, okay, Hank, I know if we ever get to make this film, I'm going to have to make it on a budget. Can I use found footage? Can I do a sort of collage feeling? I really want to get into the period. I want to use film. I want to use 8mm. I want to use found footage of the era. And later I added, I want to use our own 8mm. And he was like, you have to do that. He was like, what do you mean, can you? You have to. And he kind of gave me the courage. And then we ended up with an editor who was kind of like, who had worked closely with him, an editor who knew his style, who kind of took risks editorially, which was really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it really all worked together really well. The, writing, directing, editing, even the score, like all of it really worked together. I loved all the quick cuts, with the dances and with the discovery of who they were going to be dancing for. So it was shot in Slovakia, correct? How did that come about?
Well, Berlin, 1937 Berlin doesn't exist anymore. Thank God. I mean, if you go to Berlin, it's almost like the old city has been, it's almost like luckily they haven't denied their history, but it feels like a different city has popped up. Luckily, a much more progressive city. And you have to actually search to find bits of architecture that still exist from that time. So Slovakia happened because of a tax credit, because our producers connected with these line producers who were Romanian. And we first thought we were going to film in Bucharest, Romania. And we ended up getting a tax credit in Bratislava, Slovakia, and it was the best thing that could have happened to us because it's very small, it's contained, they're gorgeous spaces, and we could do it, sort of in our budget.
Nice. So your journey as a director, you directed a couple feature films first, Fully Loaded and Welcome to Me, which I watched both of them, and I enjoyed seeing
Thanks for doing that.
Of course. I enjoyed seeing your growth as a director. I think we all look back at some of our films and go, yeah, that's great. And here I am today. So what do you think you've learned over the years from, Welcome to Me, which I thought was amazing, had some great names in it as well, to like a film like this, which looks amazing. This film looks like millions and millions of dollars, very high production value. I don't know what the budget was, but I'm sure since you said it's indie, it wasn't that, but it looks amazing. So what do you feel like your journey has been from your first film to now in terms of growth?
I feel like in some ways you do what's in front of you, and I guess for my other films, you could say were comedies, but they're not true comedies. And it's funny, my longtime therapist actually came to see Welcome to Me. And I remember he came up to me afterward and he goes, "When did you get so funny?" And I was like, it had to be funny. And the script was funny. And I felt like the script is hilarious. We have to do the script. The script is hilarious. Kristen Wiig is the lead. It has to be funny. But I actually probably feel more comfortable in this realm doing drama. But I also kind of rebel against the idea of genre. I think you fall in love with stories. You fall in love with the writing. The themes of this film really are so close to me. My uncle, my dad had 4 siblings. His oldest sibling, he was the second to youngest, and his oldest sibling, when he was 24, his oldest sibling, I think, was born in 1920 something. And my dad was just a little too young to go fight in World War II. But his oldest sibling had like a desk job, was, I think, something about his college education. He didn't have to go fight in World War II, but he chose to. He told his family, "I want to go fight Hitler. They're Jewish. It's whatever, 1942." And he died fighting in the war. And when you have some, my family I don't have a Holocaust history in my family. My grandparents came over from the Ukraine, actually, but the story, the fact of my uncle going and fighting in the war, specifically, he was very political. He considered himself a communist. He wanted to fight Hitler. Specifically, that was what he wanted to do. And the way that it affected my dad's family, I know then affects his children. And there's something inside you that connects with this era and this material in a way that's indescribable. That being said, I feel really strongly that these themes are not specifically for a Jewish audience. It's something I'm really passionate about. I think it's interesting because we've done a bunch of Jewish film festivals. We premiered in Rome and then went to Palm Springs for the US premiere, and then have also done a bunch of Jewish film festivals. And Jewish audiences connect in a certain way with the film. But I feel like stories have to be metaphor. And when you have a Jewish man confessing his Jewishness almost to himself for the first time in front of a Nazi, yes, you're seeing a Jew and a Nazi, but you could also substitute any oppressed people. And at this point, we know what's happening in Gaza. And it's, I dare say it's almost like the reverse. It's almost like an inverse of this period. And if we can't learn from this period to take a universal message, who are we as human beings? And yeah. And since we started making this movie, the world has changed dramatically. And so what this film means has also has to change in reflection of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I mean, the themes of, money, obviously, he was driven by money at first, but then I feel like the bigger theme of this was the confession, and was, this is who I am regardless of money. And a fun fact about you is that you taught theater to prisons, correct? So you would have to have that kind of humanity and empathy in you to do that, which resonates in the writing of this film. So directing the scenes where, he does confess. Tell us how that moment landed in, was there a lot of takes, what was it in you that connected to that particular scene?
Yeah, it's funny because my brother and I have such a different, I think we see the world through a slightly different lens, but that, the way that we connect with this material is really similar. It feels really personal. It sort of goes back to the story about my uncle. It just feels like you can't make it up. You don't have to use substitutions that you don't have to, it's not that you don't have to try, but you simply have to be in the truth of what is happening in front of you. And I guess, it's that goes back to the famous, going back to theater, the what if, and in a weird way, you don't even have to say what if, because this is happening. And I feel like we all become Harold May these days. I mean, I have something specific about that moment, that scene itself, but to me, I identify with Harold. And in the making of this film, my brother and I, and those of us, and our team of very devoted producers, have become Harold. There have been several moments where we've been offered money under certain tricky circumstances that we've had to go, oh, are we selling our soul here? What are we compromising? And we have to ask ourselves these same questions. But that moment of the Jewish identity moment of, oh, I've been passing my whole life. I haven't had to be really in touch with my religion, my spirituality. I think it's a moment in this modern world we can all relate to. But on the day, it was the first take. There's sort of two different takes that we use, but the moment where he says, wait a minute, my name is Harold Markowitz, and it's a great acting lesson because he's doing the opposite of trying to cry. He's trying not to cry. and he says, "My name is Harold Markowitz." And the first take, he did that, and he had that level of emotion. And I was a wreck. He was a wreck. And I know that part of the confession, we used the first take. And it is that kind of thing. You can't escape almost the truth of that kind of a moment, that kind of a confession.
Yeah, I mean, I had a feeling that was the first take because he could barely even get it out. And as a director, you don't want to put anybody through that again. And he nailed it. So, it's been a great, hearing your journey. You went from a couple independent films to TV directing, both comedy and drama, which most directors don't want to be pigeonholed. They want to do, to this beautiful film. So congratulations for such a wonderful film. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America